Good evening and welcome to this Bolton Council Corporate and External Issues Scrutiny Committee being held on Monday the 26th of October 2020. The time is just after 6 p.m. I'm Councillor Richard Sylvester, the chairman of this committee for this municipal year. I'd like to welcome the members of the Scrutiny Committee, our councillors, our council officers and also members of the public if you're watching this via the internet, either live or the recorded version on the Bolton Council YouTube channel. Our committee admin officer this evening is Ian Mulholland, and you'll hear Ian's voice throughout the meeting as I consult with him. Our technical officer this evening is Callum Gaskell, and his role is to move the camera around the various speakers, but please bear with us if there's any technical hitches. Item 1 on the agenda is declarations of interest. If any member has a declaration of interest, could you unmute your microphone and declare the interest now? There are no declarations of interest. Is there any urgent business, Ian?
None, Chairman, no.
Any apologies for absence, Ian?
Yes, I've received two. Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Radcliffe is coming in place. Councillor Peel, Councillor Abdullah is coming in place.
Thank you, Ian. The item number 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting, and these have been sent out to members in advance of this meeting by email. We'll just go through them page by page. There are 6 pages. Starting at G1. If members have anything wish to raise on these minutes, then please unmute and let me know. So G1.
Just to clarify, Chairman, of course, I sent out the latest version in a separate email.
Yeah, these are the minutes from the 24th of August. That was our last Scrutiny Committee meeting. G2. G3. G4, G5 and G6. No member has unmuted and raised anything on those minutes. So could a member of the committee move those as accepted, please?
Move those record as a true record, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Could I have a seconder?
Yep.
Is there a seconder, please?
I will. Chair.
Okay, which councillor is that, please?
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Would members therefore unmute and accept the minutes now that they've been moved and seconded?
Aye.
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 Chair. Thank you very much. Those minutes have been accepted. So item 5 on the agenda is the committee work programme for 2020-2021. Ian, do you want to take us through this item, please?
Chairman, it's the standard report to this meeting on all scrutiny committees, and it sets out the proposed items for the remainder of the municipal year. Next meeting is on the 14th of December, and the proposed items are set out. It's for comment and observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member wish to raise anything on the committee work programme? This evening we have 2 presentations, and I slotted, as promised, all of the other items into the various months of the committee meetings. I think we can take that as accepted. So we'll go on to item number 6. This is a presentation on COVID-19 and finance update, and our Borough Treasurer Sue Johnson will take us through this update. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. So the presentation has been shared with members in advance. So in summary, we are now looking at a full year effect of costs, loss of income, and to the end of August unachieved savings in the financial year, estimated at just over £37.5 million. And to assist us with that, we have received at the end of that month 5, £20 million worth of emergency government support. You go to the next slide, please, Callum. Thank you. So in terms of the additional costs, they're looking at just under £14 million. Adult social care is obviously a large chunk of that. Direct costs to the council, 1.5 million, but on top of that, just over 4 million that we are able to recharge through into the CCG to take advantage of NHS monies available. And we've also been able to fund £2.3 million worth of expenditure through the infection control grant. Track and trace has obviously been quite a significant element of the cost specific grant we've received for that. And then there are, of course, as members would expect, a number of various costs right across the council. And we are still working on getting our savings out for the current financial year. Go to the next slide, please. So in terms of income, obviously we've had a significant loss of income in year. The commercial income is a large chunk of that, not least the dividend that we have been receiving from the airport, £6 million a year, and the impact on our other traded services across the council. In addition to that, we are estimating a current full year effect of just over £4 million worth of loss of income from business rates and 5.3 million for council tax. And that is a combination of non-payment, but also an increase in the number of residents moving on to council tax support, so they do not pay 100% of their council tax bill. And then there are also a wide ranging of other sales fees and charges across the council of 3 million. So what that means is when we did the reconciliation back to government at the end of August, we were looking at having to use about £7 million worth of the council's balances to balance our budget in the current financial year. There is some slight mitigations around business rates and council tax. Whilst that hits the council in terms of cash flow for the current financial year, the way we have to account for it within our income and expenditure account is that the impact of that will fall over the next 3 financial years. And now obviously this was the position at the end of August. We will continue to do the monthly returns into MHCLG, and we will continue to update our estimates that will fall and impact into the next financial year. If you can just go to the final slide, please, Callum. So in addition to all of the direct impact on the council, there have been also government grants that have been given that we have been able to use to support residents and businesses, not least of which is the support that has gone immediately to businesses. So we have currently paid out just over £60,000 worth of funding to businesses who were eligible in the government scheme. And we've also got there listed a number of specific grants, and we've been able to pass these out for specific purposes, not least to support our residents with food essentials, infection control within care homes, and to help support residents most in need through our hardship fund. So I'll pass back to yourself, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Sue. And our first question is from our Vice Chair, Councillor Sean Hornby. Councillor Hornby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, Sue, I'll give you all the questions together so you can lump them all together and answer them how you feel. I'm curious, first of all, there's been a lot of argy-bargy in this last week or two with our Greater Manchester Mayor with regard to the amount of money that Greater Manchester as a whole will get. Can you confirm what that figure is, and do we know at this stage how much Bolton will get of that? That's the first question. What was our position also before COVID with regard to the anticipated amount of cuts we were looking at finding, and how does that compare with it now? And the final question is in relation to during the first stage when we went onto lockdown. If you recall, councils across Greater Manchester, and I think we actually led on it with regard to stopping enforcement in relation to bailiffs and all the rest of it. What's our position now that we are in tier 3? Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Councillor Hornby. So obviously there are discussions still going on with national government, so I'm not able to confirm what the settlement will be for Greater Manchester at this point in time. In terms of the cuts that we have been facing, when we set the budget in February of this year, we knew we had to get £10 million out in the current financial year. That was year 2 of our strategy. And we knew our starting point for next financial year was £16.5 million. Now, obviously, during the year, we've been really scrutinising the pressures that the council's been facing, the demand, which is significant. But what we do know is that the impact of COVID will add about £10.5 million onto our cuts target for next year. And that is a combination of, it's predominantly loss of income, the airport dividend, the impact of council tax and business rates. A lesser amount is the increased cost of the council. So there has been an impact. In terms of our recovery of debt, we did suspend all recovery action immediately as COVID hit. We've started to reintroduce that. So what we've been doing is starting with just gentle letters out to residents, just to remind them that there is an amount owing, whether it be council tax, business rates, sundry debt. So a very gentle start, just to remind people. And we will moving more gradually back into our more formal enforcement processes. But as I always say, if anybody is struggling to pay, if they just pick up the phone and talk to us, we can look at repayment plans, support that is available, because we do understand this is a very significant issue for people, but equally we are ourselves facing very difficult financial times. So it is incumbent upon us to try and recover as much of that income as we possibly can.
Can I just come back on that, Vice Chair?
You can.
Thank you. Yeah, the final point, which should have been lumped in with the 60 million, was, as you know, GM is sitting on a massive reserves. I'm just curious as to how we as a council going to get some of those reserves, because after all, some of them is monies that us in Bolton have put in over many, many years. Thank you.
Yeah, so the straight answer is yes. There's been an awful lot of work through leaders' meetings, chief execs, treasurers. So GMCA in its widest sense holds reserves for waste, transport, retained business rates. We've been working very, very closely, as have all the other authorities within Greater Manchester, to look at where they possibly can return some of those reserves. They have listened to us. We haven't had a final figure yet. Now, clearly, as with the council reserves, you know, they are held for specific items, specific initiatives. So there will be a consequence of not spending that on other things. But they have been listening. I know that there's been an awful lot of very, very strong lobbying from the council into GM, and we're just awaiting that final figure, which will then help us balance the budget into next year. It will keep us in a much more sustainable financial position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sue, and I'm going to bring in the Leader of the Council now, Councillor David Greenhouse. Councillor Greenhouse. You just need to unmute, Councillor Greenhouse.
Apologies, you'd think I've got the hang of this by now, but still fall into this trap, Councillor Sylvester. So just if I can help Councillor Hornby in terms of the 2 pots of money available, just to be very clear, that was available within the GM negotiations. There was the 22 million that was for extra help, which predominantly would go to, as well as some discretionary, but the majority go to the setup of local track and tracing. Our proportion of that is estimated to be in the region of around 2.2 million. And then there was the discussion around the 60 million. But as we all know, it's been very well documented in the media. The negotiations collapsed because GM held out for 65. The government would not shift on the 60. Form your own views of that as you will. The tier 3 was imposed without any reference to that extra pot of money, which was additional to the furlough scheme, additional to the 66%, which was already there, to make up the difference to what was the additional help and support for businesses and individuals affected by the closure of businesses that they were connected with. So as you know, statements came out within the day that which had been on the table was still available to local authorities and local councils, and local councils could make inquiries as to how they could best achieve that. I did that as soon as I heard the statement. I'm pleased to say that officers responded well, and conversations are ongoing with officers who have dealt from finance and from welfare and benefits of how that can be administered. Currently working up a scheme, meetings with government to make sure that Bolton does have access to that, to its rightful share, which my understanding is just marginally below 6 million, which we normally, as Bolton, because of our population, it's done on population size, normally get pretty much near equal to a tenth of the overall amount. Regarding the issue around reserves, Councillor Hornby, I couldn't agree more. Actually, within the negotiation, I asked the Mayor if he would make up the 5 million, which was in the which was in dispute. Would we consider as GM authorities are making that 5 million up with reserves that were identified within GM to be able to get us across the line? That wasn't taken up at that stage. However, I am told, although I've not heard it personally myself, that the Mayor did intimate in an interview on North West the other night that he would be willing to look at reserves to make up the difference. So maybe that is possibly back on the table, and I will certainly let members know if that is the direction that we're going in. But we are due to get, and a large piece of work has been done by the Treasurer, Steve Wilson at GM, on what reserves are available to come back to us as a local authority. That, of course, is one-off. It isn't year on year, as in could go into a revenue budget, but it is one-off funds that would come back to help us through these difficult times, and definitely in terms of cash flow. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sylvester, can I just clarify? Is that Councillor Zaman I've just let in on dial-in, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that you're with us, Councillor Zaman. Thank you very much for that update as well, Councillor Greenhalgh. We're going to take a question from Councillor Hayes now. So could we go over to Councillor Hayes?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Chair. Sue, I'm really talking about the projected income losses, and I think the estimates you said were done at the end of August. Is that correct? Can I just ask, particularly in relation to business rates, with the imposition of Tier 3 since, common sense would say that it reduces the ability of firms to pay a lot more. Do you have a guess at what the latest estimate might be? Because I think very much firms will have gone through an even worse time than they had at the end of August.
Yeah, so I think our latest projections are in total, we're probably looking at a loss of income of about £12 million across both sources of income, so business rates and council tax. One of the things that is helping businesses at the moment is that the government have put in place a relief for 12 months for the retail, leisure, hospitality sector. And what that means is that the business doesn't pay the business rates. They have an abstention for a year. We claim that money back from the government, which is helping enormously. I think the latest figure was it was almost £50 million worth of business rates that we can collect directly from local government, which is great for us, and obviously it's great for the businesses. The risk will be is if that relief is not granted for a further 12 months. So as we get into next financial year, that's when we could see that impact hit. But the latest estimate across those two sources is about £12 million for the full year.
Thank you, Chair. Can I come back quickly?
Of course you can.
I'm assuming, Sue, that a lot of the effect may not be as much on traded services and sales and fees and charges. There'll also be an impact on those income streams, won't there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So some of those relatively smaller figures that we've built into the projections covers the loss of income. So, for example, the Albert Halls isn't able to trade. We're seeing obviously reduced income around parking services, for example. So yeah, there is an impact on that as well, which we are trying to keep a very close eye on.
sorry to hog it, Chair, but one more follow-up if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you for being so tolerant.
Sure. I always am.
Yes, indeed. Can I ask Sue whether, in fact, there's any real likelihood of us being able to get that sort of money back from the government for those losses, or are we not very hopeful?
So in terms of our general sales fees and charges, the government have given us just over £640,000 in the current financial year to mitigate against some of those losses. In terms of the wider business rates council tax, what they have done, which is helpful, is allowed us to spread that loss over the next 3-year budget. So it's not a return of income, but at least it reduces the impact in one full year of the total losses. So it does spread it slightly, so that does help, but obviously it's not a return of cash.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Thank you, Sue, for answering those questions. We're going to go over to Councillor Cunningham now.
Thank you, Chair. Sue, I noticed there was a 400,000 included for food and essentials, I think it was. Obviously, we're all aware of the current problem regarding school meals during the October holiday, and there's been a marvellous response all across Bolton from all sorts of private individuals and the businesses, and also the council. Is the money that we're using for that coming from that particular fund, and would there be still enough left in it, or wherever, if you could identify exactly where it is coming from when we get to Christmas, because I would imagine we're going to be probably in a similar position.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes. So what we have done is use some of that monies already to support our residents who are struggling with food and essentials through 2 routes, really. We've got the local welfare provision, which is a well-established mechanism for supporting residents. We've also been putting money out via our Bolton funds so that we can then engage our fabulous voluntary sector. So yeah, that is how we are supporting residents, particularly at the moment over the school holiday period. And obviously we are now thinking about Christmas time. It's a longer school holiday, so we've already started thinking about how we best support our residents and how we can identify the best way to do that over that period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you to Councillor Cunningham. We're now going to go over to Councillor Akhtar Zaman. Councillor Zaman, are you there?
Yes, I am finally here. Finally, yes. Are you on finance report, Chair? Sorry.
We certainly are. We are on item number 6, which is the finance report.
Okay. I was just looking at the presentation before I logged on. So the total cost of COVID-19 situation to the council is around £38 million, Sue, and £20 million of that came from central government. Where is the remaining going to come from? Are we supposed to find that shortfall within our own budget?
So there's 2 elements to the gap. Part of it, the loss of income from council tax and business rates, we take that as a cash flow hit in year, but the way we have to account for that is that the budgetary impact is into next financial year. Okay. So that's when I've been saying when we spread what we now believe is £12 million over the next 3 years. The gap in balancing our budget we currently estimate is about £7 million, and we will have to use council reserves to fund that gap, all else being equal. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Councillor Zaman. There are no other questions that have been indicated in our chat box by members. So therefore, thank you very much, Sue, for presenting that update this evening. And we will go on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is the Local Government Ombudsman Complaints Annual Report. And our Borough Solicitor, Helen Gorman, will take us through this report. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Members have had the report with the papers for this meeting. I just wanted to draw your attention to the diagram that appears at the end of the letter but before the appendices, because it neatly summarises our position at the end of March 2020. You'll see that at the top of the table it says that 43% of complaints that the Ombudsman investigated were upheld. And this compares to an average of 67% of cases in similar authorities, and a total of 3 decisions were upheld. And my report details what those decisions were, and the appendices contain further information. Thankfully, we complied with 100% of the cases which the Ombudsman asked us to look at in terms of compliance. But a slightly disappointing statistic, despite the overall positiveness of the annual letter, is that we didn't manage to find a remedy for any of the cases that then went to the Ombudsman, and you'd normally expect a similar authority to be able to resolve about 11% of those cases. So we clearly still have some work to do in terms of how we handle complaints, and I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Borough Solicitor. No one has actually indicated in the chat box that they wish to ask any question. I'm going to ask if members wish to ask a question to Helen, just to unmute now. Actually, a question from Councillor Heslop has just come into the chat box. So we'll go over to Councillor Heslop.
Thank you, Chair. Helen, could you just clear up what's happening on the next page? I can see lots of, there's a Excel sheet there from May 2019 to March 2020. I presume these are outside the 7 that were investigated, and these were inquiries. What I'm intrigued about is, A, has this figure changed from last year? Has it improved? Has it worsened? And specifically, I know from some of these areas of the council, some of the departments, that there are already appeals processes available to customers. I'm wondering why we have appeals processes in place and they've still gone to the Ombudsman. I would have thought these would have been mopped up in the appeals process. Could you clarify that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heslop. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. The report does summarise, I think, towards the end of the report, before you get to the annual letter, that we actually had 5 less complaints this year than we had from the previous year, and that was there was a fall from the year before that as well. So we're heading in the right direction in terms of complaints that go to the Ombudsman. But as I say, we still have some work to do, and members may recall that I've taken over responsibility for complaints across the whole council with effect from September. So whilst we've made some progress, we still have some further progress to be made. And I agree, Councillor Heslop, it's one of the issues that I want to try and get to grips with now that I have overall responsibility, as to why, as a council, we fail to address complaints at the appeal stage to the satisfaction of the customer, and they still feel that they need to go to the Ombudsman for an external organisation to find a remedy. So that is an area of work that we have some an area of complaints where we have some further work to do.
Thank you for that, Helen. Nobody else has indicated to speak. Actually, a question from Councillor Abdullah that's just come into the chat box. So we'll go over to Councillor Abdullah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to bring up the table in front of me, the report. I just have a question. A minute, sorry. Hi, Alan. Relating to the figure, the 43% you mentioned, and then earlier on in the report, there's a mention that there were 60 cases this year, 60 complaints. So the 43% relating to the 7 cases, what figure is the 43% out of? Is it out of the 60%, or is it out of another figure?
Helen.
Thanks, Chair. So the 43% is out of the 7 complaints where there was a detailed investigation. So the number of 60 is the total of all enquiries and complaints that went to the Ombudsman in the financial year ending on the 31st of March 2020. But the 43% is of the 7 cases where there was a detailed investigation, and 3 of those 7 were upheld. I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Chair.
Can I come back in, Chair, please?
Yes, you can.
So out of a total out of the 60, how many were upheld then? Would it just be a matter of 7 over the 60 to get the percentage?
Oh, sorry. So it's 43% of 7, so 3 out of 7. Does that make sense, Councillor? The 60 is the total that the Ombudsman had referred. The 43% is 3 over 7, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's 43. I was just referring to the fact that out of the whole 60 figure, how many were upheld? So it would just be 3 over the 60 then, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
So it would be less than the 43% that we're looking at then, is quite considerably.
Yeah, so it's slightly frustrating, Councillor, in that the way that the Ombudsman sets out their statistics, they only look at the cases where they've carried out a detailed investigation, and then they look at the number of cases they've upheld out of those investigations. So you're right, it's 3 out of 7, and the global figure is 60.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Councillor Abdullah. So we're going to move on to item number 8 on the agenda. This is a presentation on digitalisation and agile services working across the borough. And Phil Rimmer will take us through this presentation. So we can go over to Phil, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Callum, could you move it on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So what I wanted to share with you this evening really was our initial plans around how we're looking to improve the services we provide through our one-stop shop. So the first slide really is to give you some context to the way we currently operate. Bolton's actually got one of the largest one-stop shop services in the UK. We had a piece of work carried out for us by Kpis a few years ago, and any of you that have actually been in the one-stop shop will see that it's quite a vast area, and we deal with hundreds of thousands of customers through the year. Obviously, because of the situation with COVID-19, things have actually changed in terms of the way we deliver those services, but normally we're delivering 18 core services through the one-stop shop. We've just highlighted a few of the ones that create the largest amount of demand. So as you would imagine, housing benefits, council tax, housing services and registrars. We also operate blue badges. One that's not on that list, as you can imagine, that creates quite a challenge for us is refuse collection as well. So a lot of very key services operated through the one-stop shop. Since the beginning of March, because of the pandemic, we've had limited face-to-face service. That's mainly been around the provision of services for people registering childbirths. And what we've had to do really since then is quite quickly create a situation where we're providing our contact centre from home. So pretty much all of our CSOs, with the exception of some skeleton staff that are still based in the town hall, are operating our contact centre from the homes. Next slide, please, Callum. So we have a mix of services in the one-stop shop that have historically moved into the space over time, and they don't necessarily complement each other. So some of the challenges that we have in that space when we're operating under normal circumstances is that we will have a combination, for example, of services such as housing and death registration. And as you can imagine, sometimes that's a very challenging thing to manage for our customers. People coming into the one-stop shop, obviously dealing with very emotive issues, mixing with customers coming in to access other types of services. So that's one reason we want to look at the way we configure our offer. It's a very large space to manage, large influxes of customers, some, as you can imagine, with volatile behaviours. We deal with customers who have mental health issues, as I say, people that are bereaved. And what we have found over the last few years is, sadly, we have had an increase of incident reports across the service. So certainly our security and some of our CSOs have had to deal with some very challenging situations in the one-stop shop before we close the doors. There is still a high demand for complex case management that requires interaction with the person. So I suppose what I want to stress at this point in time is, even though we're looking to have a more digital service moving forward and to take advantage of technology, that certainly doesn't mean that we're going to be looking to take services away that we would traditionally provide. And where there is a need for face-to-face service, we will certainly continue to provide that. We have high interpretation costs, again, as you can imagine, and it won't be a surprise for me to tell you that face-to-face contact with our customers is by far and away the most expensive channel to access the service. Next slide, please, Callum. So the picture that is actually on this slide is the area where we're currently allowing customers to come into the one-stop shop and register births. So you can see we've made that area COVID compliant. So even though we've shut our front doors, we are by appointment allowing customers into the one-stop shop safely to interact with us. Registration service operates statutory by appointment only, and we are prioritising those customers. And I know the registrar service that Helen manages have done an incredible job over the last few months to deal with the backlog that we had at the beginning of the pandemic and get those births registered. So that services work really well under the circumstances. Another challenge that we face is it's difficult to manage evidence requirements across all services. So we deal with a range of services that all have regulatory requirements around evidence. And so it's quite a complex picture across those services in terms of how we have to manage those evidence requirements. Busier on the telephone across all services, and in general inquiries related to pandemic and associated consequences. So what we've found is that obviously we've seen an increase in contact through the contact centre. Luckily, one thing that we've also noticed is with our staff working at home providing the telephone service and no longer providing face-to-face has been more productive for us, and so we've actually seen an increase in calls, but we've been able to manage those calls more efficiently over that period of time. I think it's worth pointing out that we've already got some services that have actually really embraced digital. If you look at licensing now, they've moved almost all their customers to digital or telephone services. So an example of that obviously is taxi licensing. And in terms of our blue badge customers, now they're interacting with us either digital or by telephone, and that service works incredibly well. We deal with around 400 blue badges per month, and we've had no issues providing that service digitally. So we are very much aware that our front door is closed and there may be some perception issues around that. And so what we're keen to do is look at this as an opportunity to develop the way we deliver our services going forward. Next slide, please, Callum. So moving on to the sort of opportunities that we feel we've got. One thing we're looking to do is a light touch renovation of the one-stop shop while the doors remain closed. So to take advantage of that period to start improving the general layout of the one-stop shop. And those plans had started in early 2020. We need to obviously prepare our residents for change. And so what we're looking at the moment is our marketing and communication strategy. And something that we're about to launch is a survey of our residents to see how they want to access our services moving forward and get their feedback and opinion on some of our plans. The next one slipped through on the presentation, that should be MHCLG, so that's quite jumbled up there. And that refers to grant money that we've received from communities and local government to help us with some of this. So we got some grant money a few months ago, and we're going to be using that to support our marketing and communication campaign around this. The picture that you can see on this slide relates to something called MyScan, and what that allows us to do is to self-scan evidence. So customers can actually come into the one-stop shop and scan their own evidence using what is actually quite a simple process. And the successful rollout can be expanded across wider council areas, internal and external, and across wider networks in the borough, including libraries. So I think one concern that members may have is that we absolutely accept that we have areas of the borough where people may not be able to access services digitally, We have areas of the borough where people may not find it particularly easy to come into the centre of town, the one-stop shop, to access those services directly from us. So what this will allow us to do is actually look at using libraries, also UCAN centres across the borough, to actually install this technology. We'd be looking to try it first in the main one-stop shop in the town hall to make sure that it works. But then I think what we could confidently do is start rolling that out to other parts of the borough and centres where people can access our services. We can also introduce a MyScan app. So what people will be able to do that have got access, for example, on a smartphone, is they'll be able to download the app and they'll be able to load up their own evidence digitally, which again would prevent the need for them to come into the one-stop shop and for us to actually copy and scan that evidence for them. MyScan's quite clever in the sense that it will actually do some of the indexing as well. So at the moment we have staff who have to index all the documents that are scanned into our system. This will actually do that automatically for us, so obviously it will save time and resource. And we feel what this will do is improve the area for self-service. It will be a better working space, more visibility. We'll have floor walkers supporting that process, and what we'll also be able to offer is web chat on those self-service terminals that we've got currently in the one-stop shop. Next slide please, Callum. So moving on, one issue that we have normally is we have quite a confusing bottleneck at the front door. Some of you will know that our reception at the moment is at the back of the one-stop shop. What we're looking to do is bring that to the front centre of house, and have two reception counters. One that will deal with our customers that are coming to access our services, and one that will enable us to deal with corporate visitors. And what we'd like to do as part of that is introduce digital check-in and ID badges. So we want to manage that process more digitally, like some of the councils currently do. As I've said before, we will still be offering our customers the option of face-to-face interaction for complex case management. And one of the things we're looking at, and I think this is building on the experience of the last 7-8 months, is to actually use video conferencing booths in the one-stop shop. We really do feel that quite a lot of our customers over the last 7-8 months have already channel shifted, and they're using technology now that they would never have used before. And so I think this is a really good opportunity for us to build on that and to provide that access digitally in the one-stop shop. The beauty of that again is that we would be able, if successful, to roll that out across other areas of the borough. So again, we'd be looking at libraries and UCAN centres and any other areas with our partners where we feel we could install that sort of technology and give customers access to our CSOs face-to-face virtually. We can blend that with telephone calls, chat, digital web forms, and again, that can be delivered from any location. So it gives us that flexibility and versatility in terms of how we deliver those services. And we feel that would offer substantial business continuity that we currently haven't got through the one-stop shop. It also, we're hoping, will create a space that will allow our partner organisations to operate from our one-stop shop, including the use again of the digital platforms. So organisations such as Hoop Credit Union and Citizens Advice may have an opportunity to come into the one-stop shop and deliver some of their services from that location. Thanks, Callum. So, quick summary: looking to improve self-service, better working space, more visibility, offer web chat, self-service terminals. Our proposal is to remove most face-to-face contact with our customers, physical face-to-face, with the exception of some of the services where we absolutely appreciate we'll need to continue to do that. So things like, for example, registrars and emergency cases for housing customers would still come physically through the one-stop shop. We're also looking to introduce bots to manage early parts of media interactions such as web chat or Twitter. So you'll probably know that if you go on a lot of private retail sites now, you've got the ability to hover and actually have a chat with what initially is a robot that can generally deal with quite basic inquiries and basic advice. If it gets more complex, it then gets handed off to a CSO. And again, we feel that'll cut down on the amount of interaction we need with our CSOs, because some of that will be dealt with at the front end of the website. We'd also like to make more use of automated telephony functions for basic transactions. So we are looking next year to move on to a new payment system. Most of us now will make payments over the telephone using automated systems, and we don't need to speak to a person. And that's where we want to move to for some of our functions moving forward. We want to make more use of digital media screens. So these are screens that we can have located in the one-stop shop, in waiting rooms, designed to suit corporate messages, flu jab reminders, digital service messages, support with debt. So we can run a whole variety of things across that media. So again, an example, if you go into a lot of doctor surgeries now, they'll have a screen and they'll run messages through that screen while people are sat waiting to be seen by the GP. So it would be a similar process in the one-stop shop. Next slide, please, Callum. So final slide, just in terms of next steps, we've already started engagement with architects, services and service users. We do have to go through our heritage officer in terms of consultation, because obviously any refurbishment we do in the one-stop shop has to comply. It will be a fully project managed refurbishment and transformation. We're expecting to start early new year, but as I say, plans are already up and running now and moving forward. And there's going to be important key messages to public very, very soon. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And our first question is from Councillor Julie Pattison. Councillor Pattison.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, mine is around the contact centre. I mean, you said there's 100,000 contacts what go through the centre. Mine is around first call resolution. I mean, what does resolution look like? Because just to give an example, I have accessed these services and the one-stop myself through casework quite a lot over the years, and it's not always been pleasant. Sometimes loss of data, you can be waiting, most of the day, and then you're expected to come back. So what I wanted to know is when you've come to your conclusion of high interpretation costs, have you brought that down in terms of first call resolution? What does it look like? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Because at the moment, when I look at that, all I see is one big blur. How do you work out your KPIs?
Right, so we monitor a whole range of data through the one-stop shop. So we look, for example, at the number of people that are contacting, how long they're waiting, the number of lost calls where people actually depart the call because we've not actually answered it within a reasonable time frame. So what I would say is a lot of what we're proposing and what we're trying to introduce will actually improve that whole process, because we feel at the moment that a lot of the contact we get through the one-stop shop is contact that could be avoided if people had access to our services digitally and had the confidence to use those services digitally. And I think what we've certainly seen over the last 7 or 8 months is that the number of calls coming through the one-stop shop have increased, but we've been able to deal with those calls more efficiently, because at the same time, I think there's a number of people that have now channel shifted onto using online services. And that's really what we're looking to build on going forward, because we feel that a lot of the contact we get through the one-stop shop could be avoided. And people could actually resolve a lot of the issues with the right support themselves through our website. And so part of the rationale here is to actually create that additional capacity so that we're better at dealing with those calls.
Can I come back on that, Chair, please?
Yes, yes, you certainly can.
My concern with that, though, Phil, is I constantly get regular reports from residents what are coming through from around the Bolton Borough, not just Cursley Ward as well, where they have constant trouble trying to get through, whether that because of technical issues, even from an internal point of view, from a councillor point of view. Over the last 2 years, technology is not exactly run at its best, and that concerns me, because then if people can't get through with the technology that's being supplied, then obviously that is going to be a huge barrier. The other thing around the digitalisation, I noticed that a lot of the talk has been around what is going to happen in the Bolton town centre. I have to say, part of my manifesto was to fight for more local agile services, and especially in terms of digitalisation, because we are, again, I'm sorry to keep fetching not just the elderly, because I'm coming across young people as well what are not also PC savvy. So there is an assumption that because they are a younger generation, they automatically get it. I'm finding that's not the case. So again, these people, again, do need to have something local. It's not fair that people from Kersley or around the wider boroughs or wards around the borough have to travel into Bolton Town Centre again to access these services. What's in the pipeline in terms of that going forward?
Yes, Phil, and the title of our presentation is actually how these services can be introduced throughout the borough, in particular in the outer townships, without leaving residents who are not computer or smartphone literate behind. So could you cover that part of the work programme title, please, Phil?
Yes, so as I was mentioning through the presentation, I think the first thing that's important for us is to have services that can be rolled out into other parts of the borough. So again, sometimes I think technology can be an enabler where that's concerned. So if this technology is introduced in the centre, in the one-stop shop, and we test that technology and it works, the plan would be through a sort of phase 2 would be to roll some of that out to UCAN centres, libraries, other centres that are operated by our partners. And I think, again, what that would give people is access to those digital services out in the borough rather than having to come into the centre to access those services as they do currently. The other thing to say is that really, as long as people have got access to a telephone, we are not looking to turn our service into a purely digital service. We absolutely recognise that some people are going to need that support, and we can offer that over the telephone. So quite often our customers will apply for benefits by making a phone call and being supported with our CSOs. They don't need to go onto a computer and actually access the online form themselves. The CSO will actually fill that form in with them over the telephone. So we are absolutely not looking to remove that part of the service. That will remain. What we're really aiming to do is to reduce the level of face-to-face contact in the town centre and make it easier for people to access those services across the rest of the borough. There are other services that we provide as well that complement really the offer through the one-stop shop. So we do have a visiting service that deals specifically with our more vulnerable customers, elderly customers, customers in receipt of disability benefits. Obviously at the moment, because of the pandemic, they're not operating the way they would normally operate, but they currently would clear around 800 visits a year, and these are people that will go to people's homes out in the community and support them making claims for a whole range of welfare benefits. We've got other complementary services, for example, such as welfare rights and our money skills service that again offers that support to our residents. So what we're not proposing is to sort of turn this into a completely digital experience for all our customers, because we absolutely accept that some customers will not be able to access that. And what we also want to do is really create the capacity to provide more support to those customers that have got complex needs and complex cases. So really more of an advocacy type service for those customers, which at the moment is difficult to resource because of the volume that we deal with traditionally through the face-to-face contact.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Phil. Thank you, Chair.
OK, thank you, Councillor Pattison. I'm going to bring the Leader of the Council now in, Councillor Greenhalgh. If you're there, Councillor Greenhalgh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it was just I did indicate before Phil's answer, and I don't want to replicate because he was going on to he's gone on to say many of the things, but it is just to give an overall assurance really to Julie, and I've no doubt I can see Paul indicating, in fact I can see all Kersley councillors indicating, which seems to be, so I just want to give an assurance really to not just Kersley councillors but to councillors across the whole borough that we are not having a one-size-fits-all digital agenda here. Very interestingly, only this week, over the weekend when we're having conversations regarding the offer for FSMs, Manchester City Council have gone for a purely online application, digital online, and we were very clear that we chose a phone as well, absolutely recognising that we did not want to just limit that access to what was a very important service just through digital. So I think these go hand in hand. As Phil has said, we have intentions to roll out into the districts. That's hugely important, and you know, a lot of this is actually to avoid the most vulnerable and people with disabilities having to make that journey into the town centre from many of these areas. And actually, if that can all be seen to either through the visits that we have in place, through the support mechanisms, if it can be done through interviews or visits or on phone calls where help and assurance can be given of support, then that it has to be a way forward. I just think that, you know, every single sector is moving in this direction, and this is not to say that this is just a cost-cutting exercise. This is because this, I think, also develops efficiency and a speed of delivery that we should all be aspiring to. So I do think there are challenges there. I can see Councillor Murray has indicated, and she herself has been a great champion of you know, older people and wanting, you know, their access to digitalisation and the challenge that comes with that. But we are putting safety nets in place. But in the long term, I do think this will be of huge benefit to the residents in having this uniform approach, and one that we hope, very much hope, and the intention is that will benefit the whole of the borough and will have accessibility throughout the whole borough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Greenhouse, for that. We'll go over to Councillor Cunningham now.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's quite a lot in there, isn't there, to cover? And I certainly won't deny, I'll try and anticipate Councillor Heslop. I'm not going to deny him the opportunity to explain about the loss of service over the many years in Kearsley. But what I will go on to is the looking, first of all, interpretation. Phil, you said there's a very high cost to this. Could you give us several parts to my question, but first of all, could you give us an indication of what kind of per annum cost we're looking at on that?
Yeah, I would have to get that figure for you, our current figure. I think the general point we were making is that if we use some of the technology that might be available to us moving forward, there are ways to reduce those costs, because there are facilities out there now digitally that will do that interpretation for us. But I can certainly get that figure for Scrutiny.
Thank you. Yeah, in fact, you've just got into my next part of the question, which was, can we, using the digitalisation, introduce software to do online, interpretation and actually make some of the costs? So you're obviously going down that track already.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we looked at the reorganisation of the one-stop shop as well, and I'm not sure, but it seemed to say that we were going to have people going in there for all sorts of things, including issuing ID and checking of corporate visitors. And I just wondered, to relieve the bottleneck that already exists in there, could we not pull that out? Could corporate visitors not be dealt separately with through through security on Howellcroft South? That might be one way of helping to do that. Julie's already covered very well I was a question about the bots that you're going to introduce here, but I think Julie's really dealt with that. The overall side of this is, David just alluded to cost cutting, and it's not about just cost cutting, whether you call it rationalisation or whatever. Will we be likely to retain the amount of officer support we have now? I know you said you'll be using floor walkers, etc., or are we actually going to lose numbers through the digitalisation? How do you envisage that panning out?
So I think that's something we need to analyse. At the moment, we are operating with quite a large number of vacancies. So we currently probably have about a dozen vacancies across the service. But actually, through the pandemic, we've coped very well with those vacancies. So we've not looked to fill them. So I think part of the piece of work that we're looking at is where that will release some savings, obviously, because we know that's something we need to be looking at as a council, but not at the same time losing service and quality service to our residents. So I think what this is about doing, the trick of this really, I think, is to use the technology to improve the service, whilst at the same time allowing us to operate with less staff. And I think that's absolutely possible based on our experience of the last 8 months.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. We're now going to take questions from Councillor Heslop. Councillor Heslop.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Chair, for referring back to the work programme. You saved me a job. I think that was vitally important, that we actually stay as close to the work programme as possible. And this presentation, to be honest, to me, didn't seem to do that. As far as the the leader of the council is concerned, I would remind him that he did make a commitment to explore all possibilities of agile working, where welfare rights officers, universal credits advisors and other officers are available at designated hubs across the borough, to be led by the relevant executive member. Now that was point 12 of the 25-point agreement between the parties that signed up to the 25-point agreement a couple of 2019. I'm not so sure how your any ambitions are for Kersley. I think there's a chippy available at the bottom of Springfield Road if you want to put a machine in there. Despite Councillor Cox coming to Kersley and be escorted around Kersley precinct, it was the aims and ambitions of at least 2 councillors to make use of some of the facilities, in some of the remaining facilities left in Kersley. Unfortunately, Councillor Cox, it's been well over 12 months now, probably about 15 months since he went to this centre. I've spoke to the owner of the precinct, and nobody from the council has been in contact in respect of that precinct. So I'm intrigued as to what went on there. I just want to make the point that this one-stop shop is nothing to boast about, as far as I'm concerned. We've got one of the biggest in the country. I think that's a bad thing. And really we have to remember that probably the Labour group introduced this, again for the politicians, not for you, Phil, that introduced this one-stop shop, and many other authorities, local authorities, unless you can provide anything else, maybe at this point, Phil, you could, do have lots of little one-stop shops, and I think some of the Greater Manchester authorities do as well. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, please do. So I don't think it's a good thing. We look at 100,000 users per year. If you looked across Falmouth, if you extrapolated that figure, it's 12,000, approximately 12,000 in Falmouth and Kersley. That's 240 a week, or 50 per day. And there's no, other than virtually, there's one-stop shop in Falmouth Library, which is virtually a photocopying facility. Nothing in this part of the, despite the demand. And although you may make reference to economies of scale, what you don't take into consideration is the people who are coming from places like Stoneclough and Kersley and are paying bus fares, and repeatedly paying these bus fares, are disadvantaged compared to the other people around the borough, particularly those in Bolton town centre. They're having to pay this, and it's a vicious circle. Do they then claim for a discretionary housing payment because they've no money, because they've spent it on bus fares? I think just to apply economies of scale and say that something like the one-stop shop is cost efficient is not necessarily right. This is particularly problematic with the actual physical visitors to the one-stop shop as well. And I know you're aiming to do that, and I agree with that. But still, we've got the situation where the footfall in the one-stop shop benefits people financially if they come from the town of Bolton, and the people of Kersley are being disadvantaged because of the costs associated with transport. There was another point I wanted to make. Let me find it.
Well, let's bring in Councillor Greenhouse first, because he wants to come in, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Heslop, when you've thought of what you want to say next.
Okay.
Councillor Greenhouse.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say the last point that Councillor Heslop made about the bus journeys from Kersley is exactly the point that we're addressing by going more digital. We want to avoid those unnecessary travel and unnecessary extra expense, and I do think I have to remind Councillor Heslop that part of the High Streets Fund bid, which has gone in, which we've all been committed to, and a huge amount of work has gone in, and I appreciate, led by Councillor Saunders, who's chaired that process, but with much involvement from Falmouth and Kersley councillors, involves within that a hub where there is great opportunity for local services to be run from. That was always the intention, and that has gone in as part of the in excess of £19 million bid to government. Now, I accept we have not heard that reply yet. We are obviously optimistic that we would get that level of funding, and I want to give also credit. It's absolutely right that that fund was started by the previous administration and the work on that. We've seen it through. It would have been a very, it showed the commitment for all the districts that funding has been continued despite, we've heard about the challenges tonight. It was very much a priority of the administration to carry on with that investment in the districts even during these very challenging times of COVID. So I just want to reiterate that, and also I completely understand it. It's very, you know, the Kersley councillors really honestly always fight, but of course Kersley ward comes straight into the centre of Farnworth, and you represent that area, and so your residents will be absolutely a positive outcome for them if they are able, and we're able to move forward, as we are absolutely committed to that, creating that hub in what will be fantastic multi-million-pound reinvestment in that area of the borough. So I just felt it was right that was pointed out. You know, that commitment to that hub is still there and very much in writing and very much in the bid that's gone into central government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greenhouse. Do you want to come back in, Councillor Heslop?
Yeah, it was just one point. Thank you for that, Councillor Greenhouse. I also, given the fact that we're virtually joined with Farnworth in some parts of Kersley, there is a sizable area of Kersley that has been left behind, the other side of the St Peter's Way in respect of services, and some people simply don't go into Farnworth. This will lead me to the next point, and this is really directly for Phil. Is there any qualitative data that suggests that the outer parts of the borough are not being disadvantaged? In other words, the footfall in Bolton one-stop shop is representative of the whole of the borough and not just the town of Bolton, as I suspect it is. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Heslop. Phil, would you be able to answer that point, please?
Yeah, so I think Councillor Heslop, that's why. First of all, to make the point, I'm certainly not boasting about the size of our one-stop shop. I think one of the issues we've got is we want to make better use of that space, and so part of the reason we're looking at this is because we feel we can deliver that differently. So it's not saying that it's great that we've got a huge one-stop shop. It's about how we reconfigure that. What we are really committed to is speaking to our residents, taking this as an opportunity to consult with our residents and find out how they want us to actually deliver our services. So obviously over the last 8 months, all our data is going to be the data that's come through the contact centre, because people haven't been coming through the one-stop shop. And we want to really capitalise on that in terms of speaking to our residents and saying, right, you know, how have you coped over the last 7-8 months in terms of accessing our services? I know quite a lot of my friends have now been buying technology for the mums and dads, and they've been using Teams, they've been going online in a way that they've never done before. So I think we want to capture that really in terms of evidence about the way people have coped over the last 7-8 months, and then build on that in terms of these future plans. We've struggled for years with channel shift in terms of how do we create a situation where we can move people onto different channels but give them the right support. I don't think we've ever had a better opportunity than we have now, because of the situation we've been in with the pandemic, to actually look at that and support our residents moving into a different way of interacting with the council that won't involve them getting buses into the centre of town as the only way they can access our services. I'm absolutely committed to getting those services out into the borough in a way that benefits everybody, and I can absolutely give you that assurance that that's one of our priorities.
Thank you very much, Phil. We're going to go over to Councillor Murray now, who has a question. So, Councillor Murray, are you there?
I am, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'm not going to go over some of the things that Councillor Pattison had brought in, because they were on my list, and I'm trying to be positive, and I'm also trying not to be parochial. I'm trying to speak for all citizens who are marginalised. And can I thank Phil, because obviously everybody's been listening to our concerns about people who are marginalised, and he's put more meat on the bones with, I was really pleased to hear about the visiting services and people going out. I'm not sure they can do it quite at the moment, but it'll be brilliant, that, and especially with welfare rights. because I do worry about personal details having to be spoken on a phone, really. So really all I want to say is I'm just relieved that we've still got the one-stop shop. We can still phone in, and that there's still some face-to-face services that citizens can can tap into. But thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Now we're going to go over to Councillor Peter Wright. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. It's talking about the self-service machines again. It's I welcome them. They're a good addition and will make life a lot easier for people accessing services. But my problem is with the challenges that people may have of using these machines. It's not just people who may not be computer literate. There's the elderly, the blind or visually impaired, dyslexic. A lot of people with low literacy might not be able to access them. People with manual dexterity. And my concern is that these home visits, which you said you will do, obviously they'll be limited. You can't send lots of people out, and dependent on what benefits they're on, they might not get a home visit. So I'll be keen to have a good amount of people still in the one-stop shops to deal with these people. And I'm wondering, these machines, self-service machines, will there be talking machines as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. First we'll go over to Phil, and then afterwards we'll go over to the Executive Cabinet Member, Councillor Muslim, who has responsibility for this area of the council. But first of all, back to Phil.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the first point to make about the visiting team is that is a well-established team. So they've been operating for a great number of years, and we've got two very experienced members of staff. We, in a normal situation, as I say, we get through around 800 visits per year, and that is absolutely aimed at those customers that have got certain vulnerabilities that would mean it would be very difficult for them to access our services either physically in the town hall or digitally. And they will go out and they'll do all that for them, including collecting the evidence requirements. So, you know, that is something that we're hoping we will be able to maintain. And I think that's very important because, again, there is a recognition that is something we're going to need to continue to offer to give support to those particular types of residents. In terms of the MyScan, the way that will work is we will have a floor walker supporting that process. So basically, it's a very simple device to use. It's effectively a tablet with a plate behind. The evidence goes onto the plate and you take a photograph of the evidence. But again, we do accept that people will want support with that. So we'll have a floor walker that will patrol that area and provide support to residents as they're using that system. And what we're hoping, as in most technologies, once people have used that once or twice, the next time round, it will be easy for them to use it. So, you know, I think it's about giving people confidence that that technology actually works for them.
Chair, can I comment again, please?
Yes, you can, Councillor Wright. Yeah. Of course you
can. It's just one point that wasn't covered. These machines, will they also be talking machines? So people with problems with visually impaired, they'll be able to use them easily. Thank you.
Yeah, I will actually check that in terms of the technology, because I think it's a very good point. I suppose what I was trying to say is we will have people there to support people using the machine, but I think it's a good point, and I will actually check whether that technology is part of the offer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, and we'll go over to Councillor Muslim now, who's the Cabinet Member for Digitalisation. Councillor Muslim.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come in really towards the end where I could see there was a couple of points I was going to come in earlier, but the leader came in before me. But just to sort of pick up on a few points that have been made, really, because, you know, as has been talked about throughout this whole segment of the of the committee tonight, I think it's clear that we do have a commitment to make sure that no one's left behind as part of this this more forward journey into digital. And I think I can stress my personal commitment to that as well as the executive member responsible for this area of the council's operations. So that I'm fully aware of that, and I know Councillor Murray, we've spoken before at these committees about making sure that the elderly have their rights and aren't excluded from anything, and absolutely committed to that. One thing I would say as well, I think it's worth picking up on as part of this conversation now, is that actually live at the moment is a round in the Bolton's Fund that is aimed at tackling digital inclusion, essentially. And this is really vital because what we've seen throughout the pandemic is obviously a lot more focus of community groups going more digital with their offer, and also making sure that people aren't left behind. And so that fund that is active at the moment will be really important, making sure that people do get full advantage of digital services and are able to engage in a more digital way that is being accelerated more and more as this pandemic continues. So I just thought it was really important to mention that. And I think as well, what we've got to think about when we've spoken about the one-stop shop a bit tonight, or quite a bit in fairness tonight, and its current state, I don't think it really works for what we want to do as a local authority, and I don't think it really works for what residents want to do as well when they interact with the council. And so it's great that Phil is leading on this way of transforming the one-stop shop into a hub that is a lot more appropriate for people going forward. And the MyScan station that we've spoken about, this has been partly been led by funding a bid that we submitted to MHCLG through the local declaration. I don't imagine too many people will remember, but that was something I signed. One of the first things I did as executive cabinet member was to sign this council up to the local digital declaration to ensure that we're getting support and access to grant funding from government to make sure that we can adapt more digitally going forward. So that part of the funding is enabling us really to move forward with this MyScan station. And as Phil picked up as well, we can try this out in the one-stop shop and make sure it works, but then also make sure that it works in hubs, in UCAN centres or libraries or wherever it may be across the borough of Bolton, and making sure towns all do benefit from that. And so I think that's just key to stress, that this isn't just about transforming the one-stop shop into something that's a bit different from what it is now, but it's actually something that works for all staff, for all residents, but also staff, because what we've found as well is that a lot more staff have been, their well-being has increased as they've been working from home, and they've had that flexibility to look after their kids and not have to worry about childcare. And some of the things we're talking about doing, where a resident can come into, perhaps it's the one-stop shop, or maybe they could do it from their phone in the future from the comfort of their living room, and interact with a member of staff over video, and actually have that engagement, and the staff could actually have a bit more comfort and flexibility in how they operate, as well as giving that flexibility to residents as well. And so I don't think we should ever forget the positive impact that this will have on staff going forward as well. So I think there's just a couple of things there that I just really wanted to mention. But as I say, this isn't about excluding anybody. It's about making sure that we're taking everybody with us. And going forward, I'm optimistic that as we know that a lot more people do want to interact with us more digitally, we'll give them the tools to do that. And looking at the website, looking at the one-stop shop, looking at how we use artificial intelligence going forward, perhaps using web chat and things such as that, and then also just making sure that how we operate as a local authority is fit for purpose. And of course, we have our new assistant director for transformation, Andrew, who will be fundamental into making sure that this local authority has a really open approach to transformation and technology, and one that benefits both staff and residents. But I just wanted to sort of summarise a few of the things there, Chair, that have been brought up tonight. And obviously, if at any point anybody has any questions, they can always contact me directly, should they wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Muslin, for rounding up that presentation and agenda item. And we're going to go on to item 9 on the agenda. This is another presentation. This is on working from home, the corporate buildings and the usage, and how staff are working from home during the COVID-19 pandemic. And our Council Officer Lee Fallows will take us through this next presentation. So could we go over to yourself, Lee?
Thank you, Chair. So I have a short presentation here just detailing the work that the Council's undertaken today regarding staff working from home, obviously as a result of the restrictions placed upon us by the ongoing COVID pandemic. And then also just provide a short verbal update regarding the work that we've done in and to council buildings across the whole of the borough to make them COVID secure, and then just share some details of the current usage. So just in terms of a bit of scene setting, in terms of where we were at in mid-March, just prior to COVID, we've had a working from home policy that's been in operation for quite a number of years, really focusing specifically more on the health and safety aspects of making sure that people had the right chairs, the right desks, the right equipment. That was already under consideration, and we knew that needed refreshing, just because of the advances in technology and everything else that had happened since that was initially written. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the change that we've gone through, as at the 1st of March this year, we have approximately 15 permanent home workers, and then there was a small number of staff who would work from home on an ad hoc basis, so maybe if they had a project that they needed to do. So it was quite small numbers. So if we could just go on to the next slide, Callum, please. So this, just to give you an idea, so if you bear in mind that we had around 15 staff as at the 1st of March, the 30th of March, which is a week after lockdown, there's some tables there that will show you that literally overnight we had just over 1,000 staff working from home. And then we had quite a high number of staff, about 700 staff at that point, who were not working in any capacity. That was because the services that they were actually employed in, such as school meals or social needs transport, those services obviously stepped down, and we needed to do some work to redeploy those staff. As at the 1st of June, you will see that those numbers started to get reduced slightly. Obviously, we're getting used to working within the new normal then. We had around 1,300 staff working at home on any given day as at the 1st of June, and you'll see it not working at any capacity. There was approximately 200 staff that we had managed to redeploy at that point into other services across the council. And then as at last week, so at the 20th of October, again, we still have just around 1,100 staff working from home on any given day. And we are now down to 8 staff that are currently not working in any capacity. Just myself in HR is aware of all of those 8 cases. They are quite complicated situations, and we're still working through those on a weekly basis. Can you just go to the next slide? So in terms of some reflections, just in terms of the working from home, it would be fair to say that March was quite a significant challenge in terms of for managers and for our IT colleagues to get the infrastructure up and running. I think we learned a huge amount from that. And we have now got used to this new normal in a way of people working from home and using obviously this technology, which we wouldn't have been doing some months ago. The big thing, or the big push that I am working on at the minute is what I'm calling a wraparound health and well-being to staff. I'm very conscious that as staff work from home, there is a real risk that they do not see their colleagues for any length of time, that the whole team ethic and the bonding that happens in offices and things like that can get lost. We've had a few instances over recent weeks of staff reporting that they're beginning to feel a bit isolated, so we need to make sure that we continue to support staff and managers in undertaking their health and well-being responsibilities. Another piece of work that is happening with the health and safety team over the coming weeks will be a big push around the display screen equipment advice and rolling out some online training for staff and managers. Obviously, just because staff are working from home, that doesn't mean that the council's responsibilities under health and safety legislation are diminished in any way. And we just need to be mindful that there will be significant numbers of staff who may be working on desks or chairs that are less than ideal. So we need to make sure that staff are supported, and where appropriate that we purchase equipment for them to make sure that the safety is maintained. This is very much work in progress, I think, and I would be fair to say we're all learning as we go along in terms of how this will work. There are some real positives that have come out of it that which will fundamentally change the way that we work for the foreseeable future, if not forever. And we just want to build on that in terms of where we're at now. Would it be helpful if I just move on to in terms of what we've done about the corporate buildings, because I'm conscious that that was a part of the presentation that I had missed off, and I do apologise.
Yes,
so,
if you would cover that next, please.
Of course I can.
Please.
No
Thank
problem.
you. Thank you.
No problem. So the use of corporate buildings and how we've managed that has been managed by the council's corporate recovery group. That is chaired by Bernie Brown, the director of Children's Services, supported extensively by John Dyson, the deputy director of Place, and is made up of a number of senior key officers across the council, including representatives from communications, people from corporate property services, myself on HR, and we also include the trade unions in this because they have been key in a lot of this work that we have done. The approach that we have taken across all council buildings and for all staff is that there was a three-stage process that was introduced. So first of all, there was a risk assessment undertaken for each council building where staff were based. Underneath that was an office or workspace risk assessment. So that was where if you have an overall building risk assessment, so if you imagine the town hall, there's a generic risk assessment that provides all the basic control measures that are needed. But then there are some certain office spaces that just need bespoke risk assessments adding in. So I don't know if any of you are aware of the 4th and 5th floor in the town hall, that they're not quite the same as the open plan spaces across the town hall, so they have their own bespoke risk assessments. And then finally, we developed an individual risk assessment and an individual wellbeing assessment, and that was for managers to discuss on a one-to-one basis with all of their staff to employees, was to explain to them all the measures that we'd put into the workspace, discuss any individual health concerns that person may have, discuss the travel arrangements that person may have. So if they were having to come on public transport from a long distance, we needed to just make sure all that was factored in. And also just to give us the opportunity to really explain and share with them all the control measures and safety measures that had been introduced since COVID happened. To date, we've identified 83 core council buildings that have required a risk assessment. As of today, 81 have got completed risk assessments. 2 are what we class as partially completed, but they're actually due to be signed off tomorrow at the corporate recovery group meeting. They just need to be shared with the trade unions. So that will be all 83 core buildings assessed as being safe and all the control measures being in place. Obviously, each building that we have is slightly different, and as such, all the control measures that are in place vary slightly, and that just depends very much on terms of the type or the usage of each building. So what we have done is based the best practice on the core, what we call the administrative buildings. So Bolton Town Hall, Padderbourne House and Castle Hill, that is where we have the highest numbers of staff generally concentrated. And the best practice and lessons learned from that are what we've replicated across all the other buildings. So just to give you an idea of some of the measures that we've introduced, and I'll have to apologise because I've had to make a list because you forget just how much you've done over the months. So all staff have been issued with a return to work booklet, so that was sent to every single member of staff, explaining what control measures have been put in place, their responsibilities, and all the different things that had happened. So I don't know if many of you have been into the town hall recently, but we now have a one-way system. So we have so you're coming through the I always get it confused. I think it's the south side. It's where the Bolton Evening News offices used to be. You can only come in that way, and you leave out of the opposite side near Paderborn House. All the corridors are one way. All the stairwells are all on a one-way system. We have introduced a test and trace core tag system as you come into the building, so all staff are required to show their core tag at the test and trace pad. That just allows us, if at any time a member of staff is diagnosed with COVID or gets symptoms while they're in the office, we can run a report quite quickly that will identify which staff are in that building on any given day. We have introduced A and B desk configurations throughout the town hall, so each desk has a marking on. That allows that we can maintain social distancing at all times, and that's also supplemented by team rotas that are in across so each team has its own rota to make sure that there's a specified number of staff in to make sure that social distancing can be maintained. Hand sanitisers are throughout the building. You literally can't move for hand sanitisers. They are everywhere. Every single desk has or should have hand sanitizer and wipes on them. If for any reason they're not on, there is a number for corporate property what you can ring, and they're brought straight over. We have quite a significantly increased building cleaning regime, including quite enhanced cleaning of touch points such as photocopiers, handles of doors and things like that. And there also has been a significant investment in signage throughout the town hall. So all the pictures as you go up the stairwell, that's been replaced with COVID signage, and that has been replicated throughout all of the other buildings. Overall, the building is monitored on a daily basis. Managers are reminded regularly of their responsibilities. All staff, we send out quite regular staff bulletins just to remind staff of their responsibilities about making sure we maintain a safe and healthy workplace. And then just to give you a rough idea of in terms of numbers, within the town hall there are currently around 680 desks available on any given day. Following the risk assessment and the introduction of A and B desks, we have an absolute maximum occupancy of around 40% in the town hall. So that would be absolutely maxed out in terms of that's as many staff as we can get in. However, when we've looked at the core tag records, it varies on any given day, but there's generally between around 60 and 100 people working in the town hall on any given day. So it gives you an idea of it is quite small numbers. It does allow us to do social distancing quite easily. We've not got into those difficult conversations. Obviously, a few weeks ago, we were having discussions with staff in terms of looking to get more people back into the workplace on a more regular basis. Since we've moved into tier 3, those conversations are being slightly more sensible, just in terms of making sure that we maintain numbers, but also just meet with our health and safety obligations, but with a real emphasis on making sure that managers are in touch with staff to check on their health and well-being. That's probably as much as I have to say. I think the key message is the corporate recovery group is well established now. We meet on a weekly basis. We meet with the trade unions every other week. We will continue to refine this and improve things, and obviously we're always open for any ideas or lessons learned. So if there's anything, please just shout or let me know.
Thank you very much, Lee. And could I just say thank you very much for that presentation. And I come into the town hall very regularly. I'm in the town hall right now. I feel very safe. I've seen the changes over the past few months of what you've implemented, and I think it's absolutely excellent in the short space of time which you've had to implement everything safely and properly and professionally. We're going to go to our first question, which is from our Vice Chair, Councillor Hornby.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm glad that this item has appeared on the agenda pretty early in the year. It was an item, as you recall, when we were setting the agenda that I asked to be put on, and I think it's been worthwhile having it on, because we've seen with Lee's presentation today, we've had quite an insight into the hard work that's taking place, ensuring that all our staff are completely safe. And I echo what the Chair has said. On the visits that I've made into the town hall, I felt completely safe, and I feel that everything that we can possibly do, we are doing. And I know from time to time you might add the odd extra thing on it, but again, it's just there to make everybody safe. Obviously, I was concerned that with a lot of people working from home now, whether or not they would feel isolated themselves. And I think you've addressed that by saying that you're looking at rota systems in order to bring people in, because I think there's other issues as well with regard to that. Say, for example, there's a job vacancy comes up for promotion or something like that. If they're not getting much contact within the town hall and senior managers and all the rest of it, you know, they might feel as though they're not going to get treated fairly as against somebody that might be there on a regular basis. And I presume you've already picked up on that. Presumably, with regard to the buildings, as in what we've got and what we might not need, presumably there's a lot of work being done on that at this moment in time, so that we can put that into the budget saving options for later on in the year when we're setting budget for next year. That was one of the and another question is in relation to the fact of all the IT equipment. As you said, that a lot of the desks are now redundant in the town hall, and if we're going to be looking at this way of working in the future, presumably as an authority, the more computers we have, the greater our license is that we have to pay our IT people in order to have the license. So are we looking at those computers that are currently redundant, taking them off the system so it reduces our costs with regard to that? And then were the questions that I had anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. If you could answer those, Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hornby. Well, in terms of the IT kit, I have regular conversations with Sue Johnson and also Andrew Williamson, who's just recently started as the Assistant Director for Transformation. Clearly, what Councillor Hornby's just said is absolutely right, is there has been an absolute need for mobile devices, laptops. I understand, and I'm sure Sue will correct me, and tomorrow when she sees me if I get this wrong, but the Agilisis contract, our IT contract, is up for renewal or in the not too distant future. Obviously that will form part of the renewal process, the considerations in terms of what we are looking at now with the kit that we need moving forward. And I think the same is true for the other point that Councillor Hornby made, which was about the buildings. That will be covered by the strategic asset management plan that is currently being discussed. We will need to understand what the new ways of working are moving forward, but clearly whether we will need as many buildings is open for debate. I think that would be fair to say. I think that covered everything.
Thank you, Lee. And we've got a question from Councillor Mark Cunningham. If we can go over to Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair and Lee. Great presentation. We have talked obviously about buildings and IT equipment in the course of this evening, and it's really that's in playing in my mind. Looking from my other life of like nearly 40 years in the security industry, one thing that really worries me is now with this move to working from home, people are working in a lot of other buildings. Yes, we've done all sorts of risk assessments on our own, but every individual worker in their own home is now another building where we won't have the same risk assessment. And as it comes to the computer equipment, yes, good point by Councillor Hornby there about costs of licenses, but I'm worried a little further on that, and that is with the decentralisation of the workforce now, we need to really have, if we haven't already had, and I'd like some assurance from somewhere, perhaps not from you tonight, Lee, but we need to look at this and put this into the mix. The security, corporate security, very, very sensitive information that councils are dealing with on a daily basis. I mean, employees were never a target before, possibly, but suddenly they'll find themselves being in the firing line for cyber attacks, but without adequate protection. That's how, you know, the recent Twitter breach came about. We saw the high-profile people being hacked, simple phishing attacks on an employee at a lower level allowed the hackers to impersonate Barack Obama, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. This has been, I mean, this is serious stuff, this, and corporations like us, you know, are open to this as well. After all, you know, how can a cheap consumer router, which is in what is in most people's houses, you know, along with just a username and a password, compared to corporate security networks, which are done for us obviously externally now. But it's a real gap, this, and it's one that's coming to bite a lot of companies, and it will be a lot of organisations such as councils who would not normally have had to operate on this level. So I'll throw that in there. It's a very, very, very big item of concern, and I've heard no reference or discussion around this yet. So if you have anything on that, then yeah, great, please say so, Lee, but if not, please take this into the mix and feedback. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Cunningham, and we'll go over to our Borough Treasurer, Sue Johnson, who will answer that point.
Thank you, Chair. So I think, Councillor Cunningham, just to give you reassurance, we are never complacent around IT security. You're right, it is a huge threat, and we receive attacks every single day, but we have excellent security in place. Any of our staff working from home either are using a corporate device or there are a small number of staff who are using their own devices, but when staff log on, they log onto our network through our security processes. So in effect, they are using their Wi-Fi if at home to go into Bolton Council security. So there are no risks of a security breach or any attempts like that. We do take the security very, very seriously. Members will also have seen through their own experiences. We also have a quarantine process in place now for emails, because we know initially that was a source of external attacks. So now we quarantine even more than we did before, much to the frustration of many people I know. Any external emails coming in which could have any chance of being suspicious. And we've also rolled out some cybersecurity training to all staff as well, just to make sure that everybody is very, very vigilant, and any concerns at all to be reported. But to start off, you know, we take the security very, very seriously, and there are excellent measures put in place. So any staff working from home are directly into corporate network and all the security that comes around that to protect all the data that we hold. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Sue. And I don't believe that there are any further questions on the presentation. So could I thank you, Lee, again for presenting to us tonight, and we'll move along the agenda to item 10, which is members' business. Are there any members' questions, Ian?
There were no members' questions submitted under Standing Order 36, Chairman, no.
Thank you very much. So therefore we go to extracts of decisions arising from the minutes of other meetings relevant to the remit of this committee, and we have been circulated with cabinet minutes held on the 7th of September and the 5th of October 2020, and executive cabinet member leaders portfolio minutes held on the 18th of August, 8th of September and 6th of October 2020. Have members got any questions on any of those sets of minutes at all? If you have, just unmute and let me know. So nobody has unmuted, so I think everybody's happy with those minutes. So that brings us to the conclusion of tonight's Scrutiny Committee. So may I firstly thank members for their attendance, for all of the questions which they have asked, and the excellent discussions which we've had this evening, to our officers for presenting and answering all of the questions, also to Ian and to Callum who behind the scenes have been putting this meeting together. So thank you to them, and thank you to the public if you've been watching either live or if you were watching the recorded version via YouTube channel. So good evening. Our next meeting is on Monday the 14th of December 2020 at 6 p.m. So hope you can join us then. Stay safe, stay well, and good evening everybody.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening all.